final session. We're gonna make a start now. So if we could, come to order. And I think we were supposed to have 5 speakers. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to sit down, aren't I? We were supposed to have 5 speakers, but I think we've now only got 4. So you'll be probably pleased to hear that we might finish a little bit early. I will make sure that people stick to the 15 minutes. So we have got, for the speakers here, I have got the 5-minute and the 1-minute thing. So we will wield those at you in anger. I think we can just make a start. We haven't really properly been introduced, but we've got.
I'm João. I can introduce myself.
So I will ask Al to start off with a presentation that was saved as Spinoza. So this is, I think, we're not gonna start at a lower level than we've left off here. So I'll hand over to you. You have 15 minutes.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. So, very brief introduction. My name is João. It's a Portuguese name. It stands for John or Jack. I'm Portuguese, like Marianne and probably some others. Currently, I'm doing more academic work, following a couple of decades working more in the business side of things as HR director and all of that, namely in the software industry. So I've been doing a lot of career policies for myself and others. And while doing that, it always, I always try to have a nuanced approach to what I was doing as a practitioner. And now I'm trying to develop some ideas. This presentation today is more on the philosophical side. So, and it's interesting, and probably not a complete coincidence that some of the concepts that I'm proposing were already somehow surfaced in the last presentation. Desire bounded by the world, desire of being otherwise, from Levitas, cruel optimism. So this idea of sad passions, that is the core concept of my presentation, was initially presented by a Dutch philosopher 400 years ago. It was picked up recently by some post-structuralists like Gilles Deleuze to talk about the way people relate with some idols, namely religious idols. And again, underpinning this brief presentation is this idea of careers as traditionally conceived, and tradition here can mean lots of different things, can become a sad passion for individuals. And I will elaborate more on what is a sad passion for Spinoza, and then I will shift gears to connect this with some other with a couple of post-structuralists to present an idea. Again, this could be, as Fiona mentioned, a presentation that could also contribute for the radical imaginary group, because there is here this intent of presenting ideas that can be explored by others. So starting with Spinoza and then a couple of other philosophers, Henri Bergson, time, duration, time and temporality. I believe there is something to be said there, because possibilities emerge in time, and there is something to be said about the way subjects perceive time and project themselves in time. So Henri Bergson and then Deleuze, as I don't know if other presentations during this day or tomorrow are going to pick up Deleuze here as a philosopher of the multiplicities. And of the rhizomatic becoming. So this is pretty much the game plan for today. So so probably this idea here of careers equating to paths and ladders and levels and linearity, this is being presented as a starting point for many other presenters and presentations, and as possible a model that is a source of contradiction today, given the increased volatility, the uneasiness to make sense of different elements of the disruption that can somehow introduce an element of instability on what is out there for someone like me or he. And yeah, so a concept here that I like to bring, it's from a philosopher called Ernest Cassirer, this forma formata. This is Latin. This means a shape that is shaped, as opposed to forma formans, that a shape that shapes. And Ernest Cassirer was a German philosopher that deeply influenced Martin Heidegger's work on technique, and he did significant work on symbolic forms. He wrote about 4 types of symbolic forms that in this time for him helped him understood how people relate with the future and others. Myths, religion, technology, and arts. And the intent here is to present a career policy and this kind of imagery as a kind of technology in the way it is presented, namely not only in organized settings to individuals. And there is here this idea of possibly conceiving the possibility of bringing policies from forma formata, a shape that is given, that is fixed, that is shaped, to a forma formans, a shape that shapes others. Very simple, but I believe that there is this can be a powerful idea. Again, I found curious, and probably this is not a complete coincidence, some of other presentations before also mentioned this idea of the estrangement and of as something that is definitely needed to gain distance of what is conceived as certain, as established. So here I picked up this again from a philosopher, Aristotle, the admiratio concept, and also from Tolstoy. He also mentioned the value that can bring that can surface from making familiar less familiar, namely in an analytical perspective. Again, sorry for the philosophy, it's one of my things. So for Hegel, an illuminist, interpreting the reality was an act of revelation. Just reality revealed itself. Probably nowadays, given all these elements of disruption, this implies something different than this. Probably an element of reinvention, of, as Fiona put it, improvising something through reflexivity. Or using a concept that some authors, namely from these groups, also mentioned, being responsive to respond to environmental stimuli. Spinoza, sad passions. I must say that I got introduced to Spinoza a couple of months ago, and since that point on, forgetting by a bit that he wrote this in the 17th century. I believe there is something that is useful here in this idea of the sad passion. So Spinoza included this in his ethics book. In the ethics book, he talked about emotions, 3 types of emotions: happiness, sadness, and desire. And then he talked about alienation, and he talked about emancipation. The part of the alienation was a linear inspiration for Karl Marx's Capital, and the part of desire is understood as a linear inspiration for Freud's unconscious. And yeah, so there is something here that seems interesting and juicy in a critical reasoning perspective. So sad passions, it's a kind of emotion where a subject becomes dependent on, passively dependent on of external stimuli, and by that contradicting desire, holding out the subject. Some ideas here, probably some more theoretical than others, that can conduce to sad passions. This kind of existential benchmarking, so using this social comparison to others as means to hollow out our own desires, using this productivity as morality, this quantophrenics approach to daily life. So, and for naturalization of toxic environments. So there are some examples here, more concrete examples of an emotion that can be positive or negative, but given this positioning, it quickly becomes something that the subject is passively dependent on. And yeah, so reframing this. As one may conceive here, and as I believe it's presented here, in a world made of, among other elements, volatility, uncertainty, if one has a picture of himself in the future that is framed in a way that is somehow fixed and predetermined, there is a chance here of that becoming a sad passion, and by that eroding someone's inner desire. And by that, the experience of the world itself, of the lived world, will emerge as fundamentally as a presence of necessity, of being in need. So this idea of being constantly in need is an element that is constitutive of a sad passion for Spinoza. And here on the right side of the screen, again, Ernest Cassirer with this forma formata shift to forma formans. So reframing, for instance, career guidance and policies from something that is fixed, from something that is deliberately geared towards helping someone to project himself in multiple different ways in the future. So this move from forma formata and forma formans is another idea that is brought here. So, and this can be linked with the works of these philosophers of multiplicity, such as Gilles Deleuze and Henri Bergson, as means to conceive careers as deriving from relational becoming. There was a presentation about relational ontologies, so I believe there is some connection here to that, and also to some of the work of authors such as Rosie Alexander. I believe Tristan worked with Rosie Alexander. Yeah, so this idea of materializing where careers take place, in terms even spatially, as situated becoming. So, namely because individuals don't navigate abstract opportunities. So, and yeah. If I'm saying something foolish, please say so. Yeah. So and yeah. So multiplicities focus on becoming and in time, and helping others find where possibility becomes in time. Here you can find three images of how Henri Bergson, in a book called Creative Mind, positions possibility. So this can be used, and probably was already used as metaphors in a career guidance perspective. You have the spool, you have the elastic band, and you have the spectrum. The spool, it's time conceived as linearly. There is the past, the present, and the future. But then things become a bit more interesting in the perspective of helping others conceive where possibility for them may exist. In these two images of the spectrum, that conceives possibility not as in a discrete manner, but as a continuum where opportunity unfolds from pre-existing opportunity and throughout time. And something that I think can be powerful is this elastic band metaphor, this idea of possibility deriving from movement. It implies movement. It is not a given. And it implies others. So the elastic band, the others can be the world, can be another person that supports someone, identifying the possibilities. So three images that Henri Bergson proposed to help others identify possibility in a given temporal horizon. To end, there is a thing here, so imminent possibilities. So possibilities contained already in the present, they are not given. They imply experimentation. Or using Gilles Deleuze's terms, they imply creative differentiation and to make a possibility real. Experimentation doesn't mean to be a master in virtual disguises, as a chameleon, because that probably could be conducive to more sad passions. So it means to all out the subject. So to conceive careers in a responsive manner, and responsive to opportunities that imply actualization, this idea of the experimentation and responsiveness. Responsiveness was something that I learned here with some colleagues from another group. This reference from this year is from some Dutch colleagues that are developing this idea of the responsive career, responsive meaning timely and adequate career, answers to opportunity. So Yes, so these are the experimenting as future-proof dimension to make a possibility concrete. To end, I have also a summary of this, the forma formata for the forma formans. If you that summarize a bit this to ways to convey career imaginaries. I just would like to leave this presentation with this idea from Deleuze, this idea of the exonifying rupture. That I do believe it's probably this is a very loose interpretation from I have, but this idea that it is okay for a career to break, does make sense, because for Deleuze, in that horizontal rhizomatic perspective, there is no point of origin and there is no point of ending. There is no end point. So it's okay for someone to lose a job, and it's not okay. But in the perspective of helping others making sense of that, this more horizontal idea based on non-linear movements, movements imply action from the subject, that elastic ribbon kind of thing. So the center point of this image, it's not the one that's holding the elastic or the elastic itself, it's the movement. That movement is what makes possibilities real. And this was pretty much it. Hopefully this was interesting and not too dry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting indeed. And it's always worrying for me when I hear people citing Rosie Alexander, who was one of my PhD students and now is...
I was not aware of that.
No, but she's now far eclipsed me in all of her thinking. So I feel I'm always both proud and irritated by it. So it's but I will tell her that she was being cited today. So yeah,
There is evidence.
yeah, very good. So yes, so. Sayedan,
Yeah.
please, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes to talk to us about your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Seyithan Demirdag. I am from Turkey. The meaning of my name is the leader of leaders. I never planned, but ironically, I am teaching in educational leadership department. So never planned really. So why did I pick this topic? I briefly want to talk about that. I used to teach in the United States. I used to teach science courses, and I conducted a study about the teachers in the US. And I found out that 50% of teachers in the States change teaching position within 5 years. So I was curious, okay, after I am done with my PhD and blah, blah, I came back to Turkey, and I was curious how my country was different from United States. So I also conducted research about the same topic in Turkey, and almost no one teaching for government or governmental sector leave the teaching position in Turkey. Because for them, it is basically like a survival thing, and they could never leave that position. Not for the private sector, because they pay much, much less, but for governmental sector, they are doing okay. And I never heard anyone actually resigning or leaving that job in Turkey. So, and I conducted a research about the teacher candidates and also some who are actually having careers, and also students in master's and PhD programs in Turkey. So I conducted my research on 21 students in bachelor's and graduate school. So I would like to share my findings with you. So it's very different than today. Basically, I listened a lot of theories and stuff. This is more like an empirical study from basically Turkish setting. Let me just move to. Okay, so my paper basically focuses on how people create and recreate the interpretations of careers under conditions of uncertainty and structural constraints. The study focuses on the evolution of career interpretations over time and how people interpret labor market dynamics and the interaction between individual, social, and structural factors in access to career possibilities. It also calls for adoption of more socially responsible and sustainable models of career guidance. Finally, rather than focusing solely on personal success, career guidance can be employed as an agent of change, promoting social justice, community well-being, and sustainability. In terms of the importance of this study, I checked like literature basically from Turkish setting, and I didn't find much studies focusing on that kind of study, like teacher candidates or people in graduate school and their perceptions about careers and the transformation of the meaning of careers for them. So these were my research questions. First one basically focuses on what career meant and also the transformation of the meaning of career for them. The second one basically focused on the perceptions of their labor market and also the types of uncertainties and anxieties that they experience about the careers. The third research question was about the role of basically individual, social, and structural factors. Basically, like what kind of factors are affecting the opportunities related to getting careers. And the last one was about, that was my main focus actually, since I'm in higher education, like those guidance, services, how do they, career guidance service, how do they serve for, students in Turkey before they are getting actually into the labor market. So my research design was based on a qualitative approach, which was focused on critical interpretive paradigm. And I had 21 participants, as I mentioned. And for sampling technique, I focused on maximum variation sampling because I collected data from 8 different Turkish universities. This is the table for demographics and other stuff. Like for monthly family income, I also had the option for low, but so far no one selected that. I actually thought a couple of them would pick that, but mainly the monthly family income of the students were, or the participants were middle and some high level. And as I mentioned, I had participants from 8 different Turkish universities spread out basically all over the Turkey. But because this was like a qualitative analysis, I did not have many participants. So only 21. In terms of methodology, I created a semi-structured interviews. I, of course, get some experts, for credibility and reliability of the questions. And for the analysis, I did, I analyzed my data based on open Excel and selective coding. So I want to jump to the findings. The first table is about the first research question, which was about the perceptions of career and its transformation, like how career meant for them and how it transformed throughout the time. So those are the, like I said, I analyzed based on themes, sub-themes, and codes. I got 4 different themes for that research question. They were ways of defining career, changing career perception over the time, career expectations and future plans, and also factors affecting the career process. Based on that analysis or the table, this is the result of the finding. I kind of try to summarize that. So career is a dynamic concept shaped by ongoing interaction between individual ambitions and structural conditions. Some participants have redefined career in more meaning-oriented and well-being focused terms, while others maintain traditional views. Again, career expectations and trajectories are influenced by various motivations and socioeconomic processes, indicating that career progression is a collective rather than purely individual endeavor. And I also, for each research question, I also selected some quotations from the participants, and I want to share those with you. I will just read a couple of them. For example, one of the participants said that career for me is not just a job, it is a journey where I express myself, produce, and develop. Its meaning has changed over time, whereas before it was more about security and success. Now, happiness, satisfaction, and feeling good about my work have become more important. Let me read one more. Looking at the current situation, the meaning I attribute has also changed because it has become difficult to secure the profession in which we can build a career. Therefore, career has become unimportant in my opinion. Instead, there is a process where favoritism exists. If you guys know a little about the Turkish literature, about how teachers are being selected or appointed, let me just say, there is a big issue about, especially you take two exams. One, just written exam. Another one is oral exam, and there is a huge issue with the oral exam in Turkey. And politics also get involved in that. If you don't favor certain political party, may God help you. Let me just say that. Yeah. I love my country though, but those are the issues we have, unfortunately. The second, the analysis from the second research question was about the labor market perceptions, uncertainty, and anxiety. So also we got 4 themes out of that. Okay. Perceptions of the labor market, structural and systemic problems, uncertainty and anxiety in career processes, coping and adaptation strategies. In terms of summary, the findings stated that the labor market is perceived as uncertain and complex, leading to negative outcomes such as anxiety, insecurity, and pessimism. Also, even though some individuals perceive opportunities for flexibility and self-development, many express concerns about meritocracy, economic instability, and skill mismatches between job demands and qualifications. One of the participants said that I trust myself and my work ethic, but if I were to become unemployed, in the current situation, supporting my family, lowering our standards, and not being able to provide for my child would worry me. And one said that job security does not promise much security, especially in the private sector. Very big problem. Temporary employment is the same. You can be fired at any time. Regarding unemployment, I have concerns like not being appointed. For the third research question, it was about the factors affecting career opportunities. Let me just jump to the findings. Career opportunities are not determined solely by individual effort or ability, but are strongly shaped by external factors. While skills and motivation remain important, systemic issues such as discrimination, limited meritocracy, and unequal access play an even greater role in career outcomes. Family and broader social context can also influence individuals both positively and negatively. One of the participants said that both factors are important, but primarily it will be individual's effort. However, even if the individual acts according to their own inner voice, social realities are more dominant. Lastly, The question was about the university education and career guidance services in there. Higher education institutions in Turkey particularly often fail to meet the practical needs of the students and professionals. Participants highlight key shortcomings, including limited practical training, inadequate accessibility, and gaps in guidance, and emphasize the need for stronger industry collaboration and ongoing support systems. Overall, effective career guidance requires inclusivity, practice-oriented training, and a sustainable real-world focus. One of the participants said that career guidance services should be made continuous in a structure that centers personal abilities and interests. Everyone's participation should be ensured. When only certain people are included due to favoritism and stuff like that, others cannot access most services. In conclusion, this study shows that careers in contemporary society are increasingly viewed as a dynamic and multidimensional, shaped by the interaction between individual agency and structural conditions. Participants shift from extrinsic, reward-based views of career toward intrinsic orientations focused on self-realization, meaning, and social contribution. However, these aspirations are constrained by structural barriers, labor market uncertainty, and issues of meritocracy. Overall, career development should be understood not only through individual skills and abilities, but also within broader socioeconomic and institutional context. And my last slide, which is about the limitation of my research. So first of all, because it only focused in Turkey, it is really hard to generalize my findings. Secondly, again, it was only a small, qualitative sample, which limits the representation of diverse career experiences. And also because of the self-reported data, of course, it may include some biases. And lastly, future research could adapt longitudinal designs to examine how career perceptions evolve over time and how individuals manage career transitions. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Really, really interesting. I think gives some empirical sort of discussion to many of the things that we've been talking about theoretically as we've been going on. So I think very, very interesting. Right, okay. I'm very worried, I'm very frightened of this. Oh shit, right, okay, there we go. I've got it, there we go. Ricky, over to you.
Thank you very much. I want to start this presentation by talking about three interconnecting stories. And I'm going to relate these stories to three images. And the images, in effect, are reflecting on time and space, which I would argue are incredibly important parameters for any study. And it's looking at it from a historical and global perspective. So the title is A Sociological Imagined Future for Career, Critiquing the Undercurrent of Progress So Essential to Career Conceptualization. And I will start with theory and then move into practice to keep in line with this idea of the working groups working together. So what you'll notice is the first image is this is a map of the world, and the story is basically when my partner was pregnant with our eldest son, she said, "Oh, I want to get a map of the world." We were talking about getting a map of the world, and my partner, who studied geography at A-level, said, "We must have a Peters projection," and I was like, "Okay." So I didn't really think much of it, and then she told me that basically a Peters projection is a truer representation of land mass in relation to the world, which reminded me of, because what we're probably used to is seeing a map like that, which I think they're called like an imperial map, kind of speaks wonders, doesn't it? And it took me back to a story of when I was studying geography at GCSE. I never did it at A-level. And I remember saying to my geography teacher, "Why is Greenland so big?" Because I can remember looking at Greenland on a globe and it like not being as big as that. And so he expressed to me that when you're trying to take a 3D model and you're putting it in 2 dimensions, you have to stretch it. And of course, the Europeans stretched the top half so that Europe looks much bigger than what it actually is. And if you look at Africa in relation to that, compared to that, yeah, or South America, you know, it's quite stark, isn't it? Yeah. So why the hell am I going on about this? So what we can notice is that Europe is very central in this image. It is the datum of time and space, and it looks much better than what it is. My final sort of image and story is I can remember when I was about 10, my stepdad, who I love dearly, one of the first presents he ever got me was an encyclopedia. And in the middle of the encyclopedia, there were images like this. It's much better than this one. I couldn't find the one I really wanted. But these symbols are like resources, like minerals, precious minerals and whatnot. And I can remember, like, it was at the time when I was looking at this, it was like when there was the famine in Ethiopia and you had world aid and all that kind of stuff. And you had images of Africa being really poor. And I can remember looking at this map and thinking, hang on a minute, why is Africa like really poor? Because it's got like all these symbols. Like, what the hell's going on here? So why am I telling you all this? So the important point I'm trying to make here is that I'm become incredibly influenced by decolonial and Southern scholars over the last 3 or 4 years. I've always been obsessed with critique and progress for about the last 10 years. I was initially came to a critique of progress via the work of the anthropologist Ernst Gellner, who talks about progress being a secularized salvation. I was then obsessed with Virilio's work, who talks about progress being he talks about it being a propaganda and a cult of speed. I'm going to focus on my third strand, which is the decolonial perspective on progress. Why am I doing this? So to utilize the work of C. Wright Mills, I'm trying to connect the public with the private. And I'm trying to highlight that the myth that we're told in the Western world is what Gellner describes as the world growth story, but what I describe as the myth of progress. That human history is obviously based upon a movement from clans to tribes to metropolises, and that's the way in which human history should progress. And we're told this myth from a very early age. And the socialization process of time and space, as I accounted for before, places me in this idea that Europe's this wonderful, amazing, important thing at the center of the world, and all of the others just need to develop. But as Parenti highlights to us, they aren't the developing world, they're the overexploited world. One does not go to poor places for self-enrichment. The third world is rich. Only its people are poor, and it's because of the pillage they have endured. And this becomes important when we think of the allocation of labour. I'm going to come on to career and how we might conceptualise career, but career is often viewed as this linear trajectory thing. So it's based upon this idea of a linear trajectory upwards along some sort of greasy ladder, and it's about being paid work. But as Marxists like Braverman would highlight to us, the distribution of labour is employers actually will make use of already existent divisions such as gender or race to segment the labour force, keeping wages differentiated and reducing overall worker solidarity. And this has a history from a decolonial perspective as well, because historically in South America, this was the very creation of the colour line which distributed who did what in society. Or we could take it from a British colonial perspective in the way in which the British Empire in India actually didn't get rid of cultures. It put cultures against each other. It defined these cultures so it could define and rule and then divide and rule. So what this teaches us is that neoliberal capitalism is an entwined project with patriarchy and colonialism. They're entwined projects. We can't look at them as separate entities. They very much rely on each other as means of othering to then allocate resources. And this is where we start to see the relationship between the material and the episteme, how knowledge relates to and discourse relates to the distribution and the justification of resources. So what we see is that the coloniality of power, what Giano describes as the coloniality of power, is dependent upon racial categories. and categorises work, labour and exploitation. And it sets out a range of dual entities, a dichotomous logic, ascribing hierarchy between the conquering and the conquered, the dominant and the dominated. I could carry on, but even through to the doctor and the patient. We use the word client in career guidance. I hate that fucking word. But around this idea there's something wrong with them that's got to be cured by the all-knowing careers guidance practitioner. And in effect, this is around Europe and non-Europe when we look at this from this decolonial perspective. This justification for coloniality and the coloniality of power is via the myth of progress, with its etymology coming from Latin to walk forward. As Andrews points out to us, the supposed European Enlightenment, which was stolen from South Americans as well, and North America, the indigenous North Americans, if you look at Graeber and Rengro's work. The Enlightenment was essential in providing the intellectual basis for Western imperialism. The UN, the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization all play their part in administering colonial logic and neo-colonialism. The world can only ever be as equal as the knowledge it is built upon. The Enlightenment provided justification for genocide, slavery, colonialism that are utterly indispensable to Western progress. And we can see it in the way in which we're socialised in thinking about the world and the world order. Yeah, Greenwich Mean Time at the middle of the map, which defines our datum in terms of time, and the way in which Europe is depicted as in the middle. What's this got to do with career then? So in the vernacular, in the everyday language, online dictionaries are great at depicting this, aren't they? So if you look at the online Oxford English Dictionary, career is defined as a course of professional life or employment which affords opportunity for progress or advancement in the world. Progress is central to the way in which most people talk about career. Regardless of the fact it's precarious now, regardless of the fact that that might be a dream for many people, it coerces us into thinking that we're useless if we do not fit within this particular definition. Not that the academic literature is immune to such depictions. Tony Watts would describe career as the individual's lifelong progression in learning and work. Or we can also see Michael Arthur from the business school talks about the evolving sequence of a person's work experiences over time. I would say very much using the Darwinian teleological language with a particular schema of how careers should unfold. And as Andrew points out to us, Darwin's theory of evolution was the perfect scientific schema to prove superiority of whites. Man evolved from apes and Africans with their different skulls were evidence of the chain of human progression. So I very much evoke and lean on my sociological bias in terms of looking at alternative ways in which we can talk about career. And I keep landing back on Irving Goffman, who wrote about career in asylums, and where he talks about career being any social strand in a person's life. I really like the metaphor of strand because it links to what was being spoken about in terms of posthumanism, entanglement, strands entangle. And whilst it's talking about a person's life is entangled with the context and other people and objects and all of the other things that you've been going on about in terms of, the non-human or other than human. I really like this particular definition of career as well because it doesn't provide a direction. A strand can go in multiple directions. Strands can become entwined, they can be pulled apart, they can be placed in tension, which very much mirrors the kind of ways we've been talking empirically as well about how we talk about how careers unfold and are enacted. And it doesn't talk about progress. So why is this important? So I would say to move to the sort of imagination aspect, I think the late Burrow notion of public sociology becomes important here and really links to what I think we're trying to do in this COS project of not only just pontificating about career in the ivory tower, but actually thinking about, well, how would that relate to different publics, to different communities? How can that relate to policy so that we can actually shape practice on the ground? And as Burrow and Van Antwerp to open, talk about public sociology is less a vision of than it is an orientation towards the practice of sociology. It is a sociology that is orientated towards major problems of the day, one that attempts to address them with the tools of social science, and in a manner often informed by historical and comparative perspectives. It is a sociology that seeks as its audience not just other sociologists, but wider communities of discourse from policymakers to subaltern counter-publics. So to link it to practice, what I'm experiencing quite considerably is that career within the curriculum in higher education is coerced by notions of employability, and you must progress up your graduate outcomes survey, which coerces what one does and the obsession of students getting a high-skill job, whatever that means. And I've written about how that's completely based in colonial logic as well. So I want to broaden the notions of work-integrated learning, which we're forced to do. And I think one way of doing this from a public sociological lens can be service learning. So just to quickly highlight some of the projects that I've been involved in, I've been involved in, I usually do involved in about 25 projects each year. This one's exploring how can we decolonise the curriculum, having students actually write lessons that can actually be taught and then teach. We've engaged with unions and also our Work Futures Union Observatory, so they actually engage with unions, not only engaging with unions, but actually do research with unions. We've also engaged, this is engagement with a charity called Fearless Youth Association, where students are actually helping them to design an app that refugees can use to connect them to multiple services that they might not be aware of. And this is students exploring experiences of working whilst learning and the kind of exploitation that occurs with that. So it's a way of engaging with multiple publics and also getting the students to engage with multiple publics as well as a means of an emancipatory form of career education. Oh, and this was the last image because this image is just gross. We won't like to think of racism as a thing of the past. Now, this is the Order of St. Michael and St. George, and this is a medal that's still given out today for people who do good for the British Empire. And as you can see, it's a white angel stood on the neck of a black Satan.
Thank you, Ricky. I'm not sure I can top that as a terminus for the next talk. Right. Okay. Let's try and right. So that was down to be me and Ria presenting. So this is Ria. So you've ended up with the less charming of the two of us, but we met probably about 12 or 13 years ago in Padua after hearing Mark Savickas deliver a lecture, and we went out and talked about this lecture. And the basic sort of summary of the lecture was careers were always one way and now they're different, so you better get with the program. And that story is actually a very popular story, and different theorists have different arguments about how careers always were and how they are now, but we've got some problems with this, and I'm going to try and very rapidly present some of the ideas that we're trying to offer. This comes from our forthcoming book, which is still in the process of being written, which is part of this new Trotman Studies in Careers, Employability and Transitions series. So if someone's got a book in them, then come and talk to me about that. There's some other very good books coming out as part of this. So we start our book with this quote from the film Trainspotting. I won't read the whole thing, but it starts with: choose life, choose a job, choose a career, choose a family, choose a fucking big television, choose washing machines, cars, compact disc players, and it goes on from there. And the idea, I think, that why we start with that is that career is a very normative concept for many, many people. They perceive it to be a very normative concept that's sort of socializing them into particular ways of being. I mean, Alex talked about this earlier on, and this sort of idea has come about. And we then come up with definitions of career, which are often quite different to that. And we've been doing that as well all day as well. So what we're trying to do in our book is to kind of historicize these discussions about career and to sort of conceptualize career a bit differently and to think about where it sits within capitalism. So we're both trying to think about career as an object that's perceived by people and how they perceive it, but also to use the concept of career as a sort of tool of sociological analysis. So, you know, similar to things like social capital, citizenship, liminality, discourse. We think career is actually a very powerful explanatory terminology, and we're trying to sort of explore that through the book that we're writing. I won't go into this in too much detail, but essentially what we're trying to do in the book is a kind of dialectical materialist examination of the concept of career, where we look both at career as lived experience and career as social and ideological phenomenon. And we draw in lots and lots of different accounts of career across an extended period of time. Now, one of the things that I want to be very clear about is we are not saying that we have discovered the meaning of career and everybody else has got it wrong. And I think that's actually a claim that lots of people make is, well, people used to describe career like this, and now they describe it like this, and this is actually the correct way to talk about it. So we draw on Laclau, Ernesto Laclau, and his work, and he has this, basically he says, look, there's no real, it's not that there's a meaning for this and a meaning for that, and when people disagree, one of them's right and one of them's wrong. What's going on is a process of struggle, dispute, disputation. And so our argument, our book, that what we're trying to say is this is our bit of struggle. This is our argument. We're not saying there's a true and objective meaning of the concept of career out there and we've got it. We're saying we're trying to get this idea of career and we're trying to pull it back in our direction, which is essentially a kind of critical and social justice orientated direction. So from the book, this is a bit of text that says something about what we think careers are. So and it picks up on some of what Ricky said, and he will probably be critical of some of this, but it says, if career is said to describe a person's journey through life, and the assumption is that this journey should run through paid work in a substantial way, it then brings into perspective that people's ability to undertake paid work is intertwined with many other elements of their life, including the need to learn, and then we go on and say, but also things like giving birth, living in a family, developing your ontological output, building a social network, finding some meaning in life. These are all part of our career, or this is the definition of career that we're trying to kind of pull things towards. So our analysis then tries to make the concept make the argument that the career concept can be expanded to recognize these broader senses of what a life project is and how people make meaning of it. And what we argue is not what Savikas and others argue, that career was always one way and now it's another way and we've figured it out. What we say is that over time, and we particularly look at the period from the Industrial Revolution to now, career has been through a number of different meanings. And obviously we periodize, and there's all sorts of problems with periodization, but we essentially say, look, there's a period in the sort of 19th century when we might call this the Bildungsroman career. It's the idea of career as personal development, but largely for the elite. And then we have the 20th century career, the career ladder that people talk about a lot, progression up, managed organizational hierarchies. But as Alex said earlier, that period is not the norm from which we have deviated, but an exception which appeared for a relatively brief period. And then we move into what we describe as the neoliberal or hustle career, which is a sort of entrepreneurial exercise of agency in pursuit of advantage. And then into the period that we talk about now, which I'll talk about a bit more tomorrow, which we describe as the careers in crisis. And we've been discussing crisis all day as well. But one of the arguments that we make here is that the career in crisis is typified by the safeguarding of a shrinking pool of opportunities. That what we're trying to do now is we're no longer trying to get to the top and become the entrepreneurial kind of Gordon Gekko figure that we might have been in the neoliberal period. We're now just trying to hang on to whatever it is we've got. And then we look forward to the future and argue for an emancipated career. So I'm going to briefly try and suggest what that might be. So one of the things that we do in each of these periods is we recognize these hegemonic ideas of what career was, the Bildungsroman career, the career ladder, and so on, and not the experience of everybody. So there are other people who are having other experiences. So while Lord Byron is traveling around Europe, developing himself and becoming a poet and a revolutionary and so on, most people are not doing that. Most people are working, often in quite bad, grinding conditions and so on. And they're developing another kind of career, which we call the collective career, which is a sort of solidaristic, I can't say that word now, approach where people are trying to advance their interests on the basis of the people around them rather than individually. So that's we see the growth of trade unions and cooperatives and all sorts of things like that. Now the career ladder then in the 20th century is primarily a male. It's a very gendered concept. The idea is that if we read Donald Super's work, we see essentially the picture of a man's career being inscribed there. So we then think, well, there's a counter-hegemonic type of career that's going on here, which we call the caring career, which is essentially what women are experiencing in that period. And then and in the neoliberal period, we highlight the idea of the sort of slacker culture. So this is a Gen X reference that maybe not everybody here is old enough to understand, but this idea that there are people who weren't bought into this culture of hustle. And then in the kind of career in crisis period, there's new forms of resistance. And what we've tried to do is extract out of all of these positives to say that we describe many of the negatives of all of these things, but there are also positives. And what I've tried to do here is pull out various of the positives. And what it gives us is a kind of set of concepts derived from our historical analysis that are sort of positive elements of career, of what an emancipated or better kind of career might look like, which has elements that we might draw from all of these different forms of career. Because even the things that we might sort of, we're all against neoliberalism here, right? But there are things about the kind of post-war consensus or the Keynesian world which were very problematic. And if you read the work of, say, Michael Arthur, who generally I disagree with on most things, he has a critique of that. Many of those people who were the kind of neoliberals in the 70s, 80s, 90s had a really, sophisticated critique of many of the things that were wrong with the corporatist sort of middle 20th century. So we try and draw some of these things out and think, well, what do we do with that? Well, one of the things that I think wouldn't be that helpful to do would just be to say, and so here we go, this is the answer, this is what the perfect career looks like. So because what we recognize is that if we're going to emancipate career, it's not going to be in the circumstances of our own choosing. So one of the things we're playing with at the moment is exploring what this might look like in different kinds of futures. And we move from futures which are essentially kind of barbarism at one end through to a kind of new and radical type of society. And so we might see career, and in a sense these are kind of cumulative. In barbarism, career becomes a sort of survival mechanism which helps us to find meaning and also potential for collective action. In a kind of period of ongoing crisis that we're currently in, it also becomes a pathway to the good life, an intervention into the political sphere to argue for a just social contract. In a kind of more progressive version of capitalism, a sort of green social democracy, it also becomes a tool for personal, social and environmental sustainability and decommodification. And then if we're going to move to some kind of new type of society, it can, I think, help to manage the intersection of life projects with the democratic, social and economic organisation. So we're trying to sort of imagine where might career fit into in various kinds of future societies. What we end up arguing is that it's through careers that people enact their participation in society, the economy and democracy. So here's an example from Argentina, basically at the moment, where the government's closed down the public broadcaster. this woman is the union leader, and she's arguing against it, and she's arguing against it on political grounds, on grounds of decent work, on grounds of freedom of speech. You know, she's ticking all of these boxes at the same time. In terms of it being a sociological concept, we say, well, career is not a natural or fixed category, but it's a historically changing concept. It's intertwined with capitalism, but it's not reducible to it. And it's about more than paid work, although work remains central to it. And we argue that through career, people participate in society in all of these different ways. And that as a concept, it helps us to analyse the relationship between biography, history, agency and structure, individual lives and collective conditions. It reveals how opportunity, security, identity and participation are unevenly distributed. And the emancipation of career means moving beyond adaptation towards expanded democratic, social and economic possibilities, and viewing that as part of the enactment of our careers. So we've written elsewhere, we've proposed ways in which career guidance can kind of engage with this, and we've come up with this framework which we call the 5 signposts, which I won't go through because I've probably presented it to most of you before in one form or another. But many of the things that we're talking about in these 5 signposts build off of this kind of more radical, broader, more contextualized conception of what career is and how we might bring it about and how we might help people to develop their understanding of themselves and their understanding of career within this kind of framework. And so what we're doing here in Leclerc's terms is this process of contestation, this process of struggle. We're defining both in our book what we mean by career and trying to argue that this is a useful and helpful way for both individuals and societies to define it. And then in career guidance, we're doing that same process of struggle and definition in trying to help individuals to think about their lives and their careers in different ways. So I will finish up with that. Hopefully that's a very rapid march through some work that is still somewhat in development, and don't tell the publisher. And we can finish there, and we can perhaps take questions and comments on all 4 presentations. So thank you for listening, everyone. So we've potentially got plenty of time. So I don't know who would like to go first. Are we gonna? Mariana, are you in the mood to be the microphone wrangler, or?
Of course.
Yeah.
Sorry. The microphone is starting to lose its
Oh,
batteries,
okay.
I think.
Whoa.
It still has some power. So,
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe Ricky can actually, you know, kind of enlighten me on the sort of concepts that I'm struggling with at the moment as I was listening to the presentations of neocolonialism and Africa being mentioned and so on. But should we basically open this more up of what colonialism might be in the context of Europe even now, you know, with Western Europe being more developed than Eastern Europe and the whole history of the continent actually embracing the concepts of, you know, certain countries are better than others and so on. And what does that mean for people's career development and the movement of people from the east to the northwest at the moment? You know, so it's not just the world that we're looking at, but it's just within Europe as well, because I do come from a country where people are just moving out of because of all the precarity of political, sociological factors, rather than, you know, people choosing to stay because they don't see an option for building what they think is decent work. So how do people move? I think it's that.
Yeah.
How do people move towards more decent work and life to begin, and how does that kind of shape the modern day societies? And also we're talking a lot about, you know, neocolonialism and getting apart aside from that, but all the authors that we are citing do come from Europe. I've just realized that we're all kind of looking again with the Eurocentric lens.
Not all over there.
Not all, but very few
Yes, of course.
authors are coming from other continents. Let's say, in how do we look at basically what is going on with careers, kind of more worldwide? Can we actually open up the discussion for that?
Do you want me to address it straight away?
Yes, yes, because I think we have some practice.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if that's working. So,
Mics are just
yeah, I mean, I think if you, first and foremost, the way that I became interested in decolonial perspectives was reading Southern scholars. So, Piano, Vignolo, Lagunas, they were my gateway into thinking about the relationship between neoliberalism and capitalism and its roots within the colonial project. And the colonial project, I mean, I ain't got time to go into that. Yeah. If I'm putting it in a nutshell for the sake of making sure that everyone gets a chance to speak here, is that it's getting rid of unnecessary hierarchies. Yeah. So coloniality as an epistemological project provides the justifications to have resources heading in one direction. And so the justification becomes othering. And so you're seeing othering in the ways, not just in terms of European, non-European, black, white, but also you even get it in regions in a country, the north and the south in the UK, for example. Yeah, the economic centre is the southeast in England, and austerity was just the means of, well, that's the only way we get the income. All the other stuff is just a leech on us, so we just cut all of the services there so we can just concentrate on what brings money in. Yeah. So I think the key is going back to what Braverman was talking about. What are the sort of existing, where is they define these markers of othering? Because invariably it's about shaping material resources going one way, and the epistemological sort of discourses are a means of justifying that. And to go to my bugbear, progress is like the underpinning of that. Because even when you take away the career ladder, yeah, and you talk to people, like I've spoken to students, like they're still welded to this idea of betterment, that your life's got to get better and better. And sometimes I say, like, yeah, sometimes life can be really shit, and that's like you don't go through that so that you make sure it's better in the end. It's like sometimes that's what you've got to deal with. And I think we get so entrenched with this idea of progress that creates that I'm going to so-and-so to have a better life, yeah? And then you get the reaction from that, oh, well, you shouldn't really be here because you're an economic migrant or you're an illegal immigrant, etc., etc. So, yes, I think, in a nutshell, what the Southern scholars teach, or what it taught me, was the importance of unnecessary hierarchies and being very sceptical of those. We should be attentive to differentiation and difference, that's really important, but not unnecessary hierarchies that become inscribed in the way in which we deal with it. I don't know that answer.
This is not working.
I think it is. I think it is because I think
This is
what-
working. Okay,
Yeah.
this is working.
The important thing is for home.
Oh, I for home. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was intrigued with your presentation, Tristan, and mainly by the brain choice. I don't know if that's stable. Of keep using career as a name. You mentioned that career is contested. It was revised. I don't know if this is too worn out to mean something, going back to Lacan's and disinvited, but nevertheless, in this book at least, you are still using careers and putting an adjective. Just candidly, can you elaborate a bit on that choice?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, that's the sort of point I was trying to make about Leclerc. Really, is that because there's a lot of energy in our field given to thinking about, well, what might be an alternative? Because career has this history, which is this hierarchical history, classed history, gendered history. So then people say, well, let's get rid of that, and then you say, okay, fine. Which word are you going to use then? And then people go, oh well, work or life project or whatever, and you hit I mean, not the same issues, but you hit a set of similar issues as soon as you start to. I mean, what does work mean? Well, what does work encompass? Well, there's a whole literature which discusses, well, what does work mean? And when you start coming up with more kind of creative terminology, like life projects or these sorts of things, you still run into a set of assumptions about what these things are. So, I mean, this is quite. I suppose that on one level, this is quite an academic answer because all of our articles have to start with like, define your terms. What do you mean by this? But I think actually, what Leclau and those kind of people are arguing is language is dynamic, and it's not. And I think like just kind of scorching the earth and saying, well, we can't use those terms because those terms are owned by the the people we don't like or by capitalism or whatever. And so we have to start using a new set of language. It doesn't solve your problem. You have to take the fight and say, well, actually, maybe we can redefine career. Maybe we can make career something. And so we have to argue about what it is. And that's essentially what this book is doing. And you can probably make the same sorts of arguments around things like entrepreneurship or progress or these things. And we get in. I mean, but these things are still dynamic concepts, aren't they? And you have to argue. I'd be interested whether you think that's the case, or whether there is language, chunks of language we should just abandon because of their association with like particular political systems.
Candidly, I can say words carry weight. Two things. Going back to Austin, right? There are some examples not that successful of people that I believe do not try to do something with that, with the entanglements and Martin Heidegger is another case in philosophy where he coined a brand new language that was ultimately translated to German. I'm kidding. He was German, but again, it's. I don't have a straight for answer, but I don't know if you are like shooting ourselves in the foot while trying to being radical by choosing the same words, but probably need at least academically to do that to keep airing what we are trying to air, right? So just being curious. Yeah,
but like to see if this works.
But I understand the question, and I think it's, for example, for people whose native tongue is English, usually it's not as big a question as it is, for example, for Portuguese. And I was talking today with Sanya from Serbia, in which the words we use, and for example, in Portugal, the use of career development is kind of recent. When I was at university in the late 90s, early 2000s, we would talk about vocational and professional development. And then we went, so it's very recent. So for us, it is markedly neoliberal, and usually you then have the change into not only career development but career management, which is even more so. So I think it's also related to the languages, because in English everyone says career development or career counseling for a long time.
I mean, like career development is recent to us as well. That's like an American term, really, but it's. But I ask you, vocational guidance, professional guidance. Are these terms that are free from hierarchy, that are free from assumptions or not loaded with meaning? These are all loaded. We're in systems of signification, and so we have to.
I continue to prefer work. I really like work, not necessarily the psychology of working, but the word work, because work, from its original meaning is, well, not original, I can't say that, but one of its meanings, it's also kind of multiple, and so it for me it's very interesting in that sense. But yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a question. I'm really conscious that I'm interested in your thoughts really as a panel, because there's so many different references and sources and authors that you draw upon, and I suppose it's one of the the strengths of kind of what we're doing here is we're very pluralistic in terms of what people, and I do this myself, I'll draw on bodies of work and everything, but I'm just kind of struck that, yeah, I know that I've got 2,500 references in my EndNote library, and I'm coming here today and there's like people talking about other work and everything, and I suppose I'm just conscious of that. There's a strength in that pluralism, but also is there a risk of kind of fragmentation and knowing that actually at some point, as scholars or whoever, we have to decide where we're going to plant our flag or where we belong, kind of. I don't know. So that's a comment really about this sort of that pluralism versus fragmentation. And I mean, you've your work between the four of you has evoked that because you've ranged, you've all drawn upon different authors. So I'd just like your comments on that. Does that make sense?
Someone said in the last session that it's okay to be radical, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to be plural, right? But probably sooner or later, some integration needs to be made, right? So, and yes, for instance, pretty much probably it was a bit too dry. My presentation was about desire, and I believe there were other presentations about desire in a more philosophical perspective. The way desire connects with the conditions that are conducive or not to its expression. This can be led to reflexivity over those conditions. Other people talked about desire, the diesta, for instance, the diesta reference. I took note on that. So there are lines here, but this is not easy. Probably these kind of forums. I really appreciated your Margaret Archer reference. I have a PhD in sociology, so I studied a lot of Gibbons and conflation and all that. So it's not easy. Probably certainly these forums matter. For instance, my presentation on desire probably could be contribute to the segment of choosing groups on internal conflict. Probably choosing by using different kind of words, and certainly doing. Currently, I belong in the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies. It's not easy doing it. I'm surrounded by engineers, art people. It's not easy to find a common language, like breaking silos and all of that. So, but I took some notes here to try to connect the dots. It's about a matter of being open by design. No, So, yeah. Thank you.
Just really quickly. I think, there are going to be times when that plurality, you're going to listen to things and that sounds quite similar to, there's quite a lot of overlap. But then I think for me, like, the reason why I became quite compelled by decolonial thought was just like, hang on a minute, there's a gap here. I think we're attacking neoliberalism, which is really good, and we should do that. But we need to acknowledge that it's part of a colonial project as well. So, the plurality, we want to avoid sort of navel gazing for the sake of navel gazing, just doing the whole sort of, and that's why I'm a fan of public sociology. It's like, so what's the praxis here? How are you using that theory for actually doing useful work and engaging with multiple publics?
I'll just say something. I'll say something also on, which is also going to draw on Leclerc, which is like I don't like we in the position paper we wrote for this, which a number of us here were authors. We had a section on pluralism and saying, look, actually this is not like a Marxist project or a feminist project that's only within one tradition. It encompasses a wide range of possibilities, and I think that's right, and I think critical theory is a broad church and so on. But if these things are allowed to just sit one next to another, then that is not that's not pluralism. So what Leclerc and Mouffe say in a lot of their work, you've got to have the arguments, and you've also got to have the arguments in a way where you might disagree, but you don't immediately call the other person a fascist, and so you've got to have, so we've got to disagree more. Actually, is what I think. We were getting to it with Anna and Sana earlier on, where they're saying some things that not everyone agrees with, and we really, I mean, like, the problem is time is always a difficulty, isn't it? But we really should like hammer that one out, because there's some big things, and so I think we need to create spaces where we disagree more and argue about it, because otherwise you're not really pluralist. You're just like, we're all here and we're just putting different things down.
And I think that Laclau uses this word like floating signifier.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of there is so many meanings and so many concepts that at the end there is no meaning, so everything can change, like a floating signifier. And I think that this is also something that we together discussed with Mariana in our paper written with Ria also and with Sana. It was about the social justice and how career guidance practitioners, how do they perceive social justice. And the thing is that from our perspective and from the perspective of Laclau, it's not that kind of moral and good thing when we allow to have so many perspectives that each one is on the same importance, and then we end up with floating without any meaning and without anything without any radicality or something like this. So this is also the argument why we, just as you said, Tristan, why we should have this argumentation and that kind of discussions and that kind of, I don't know, radical thinking, because we have to have something to stand up and to fight for as a professionals and also as academics.
Sorry, there was a question here.
Hiya, total imposter here. I am the careers practitioner, and my background is sort of higher education, but when we're talking about careers, career services in the UK can't even decide on a common name for each other. Our job titles are not protected. Anybody can call themselves a careers advisor, careers consultant, careers genius, careers guru. But the people that we work with, how do they perceive the word careers? Like, I have sat in front of an academic who said we actively tell our students not to go to careers because our students are free thinkers and we want them to think for themselves. If we send them to you, you're going to send them all to PwC. So the perception of careers, no matter how we hammer it down, it's like, how do we bring that down to the key stakeholders, the key gatekeepers within the universities who are, whether we like it or not, the person they're seeing consistently, which is the academics, the perception of that. And then I've got the creative arts students who are like, I am not going to careers because you're all corporate. So you have this problem with the people that we're trying to reach and the people that we're trying to support, and then you have the barriers actually in the language as well.
I mean, I can address that quickly. I've written about this about 4 or 5 times. So, in terms of no, I'm not saying that as in fucking dare you. It's more no. But what I'm trying to highlight here is that the key for me is providing space in the curriculum for them to actually deconstruct those words, including work as well, and that becomes a really important starting activity in terms of, and it picks up what I think the important work you're doing, Tristan, with your presentation in terms of allowing space for people to actually talk about what does that mean and sharing that with their peers and the facilitator of learning and careers people, so that because there are going to be multiple meanings for different people, but there are also going to be very strong discourses that shape it.
But may I? But there's you're integrating it into the curriculum, but apparently from your experience, they can come or not voluntarily. That's, for example, the situation in Portugal, because career counseling is not integrated into the curriculum.
It's not embedded. No.
Yeah. Okay.
So mine's about the sociology of work and career, or career studies, and that's actually in the curriculum. And I would always say go and talk to careers people, most definitely. Yeah.
I mean, what one of the things that our analysis shows in terms of what do people think about this is it's pretty difficult to say people think career is one thing. Like, it's many people think it's different things, and like over history it's changed. And I would say, like, from having worked even in the UK, between the higher education system and the school system, what career means in those and career guidance means in those two things is really different, and we're in the same country with the same culture and just students who are slightly different ages, and yet the cultures of the provision are quite different. And so like, it doesn't mean one thing, and in a way that's what irritates me about people like Savikas is that they come in and say, well, career means this thing, when actually, like, there's loads of disagreement about what it means, and you know, and it means terrible things and great things and lots of things in between.
Can I just pick up one point which kind of links to what Tristan was saying? I think it was, and I'm not going to remember the quote directly, but I think it was Audrey Collin who talked about the idea of career. The power of the concept of career was that it can hold together competing meanings without falling apart, and I think that's the sort of elasticity of the concept, which is why I've asked that question that you asked numerous times. Why am I still using this word career, and am I doing money laundering with it? And am I building my own career in doing this? You know, I've had those sort of reflexive moments. But I keep coming back to Audrey Collin, which is that I think it's an interesting concept that holds competing and numerous sort of ideas together, and that's why I think career as social strands is quite useful, because it allows a subjectivity that relates to entanglements that becomes really, really interesting.
I mean, that was in your study as well, isn't it? It's like people are coming up. When you're asking people what's career, they're going, oh, well, some people are going it's this, and some people are going it's this, and you've got, I don't know whether you've got any.
Yeah. I actually want to connect that with your presentation in the morning, like when you said some individuals thinking like they see certain, like in terms of precarity or career perceptions, they kind of put a lot of blame on themselves instead of like, employers or external factors.
Continue.
Yeah. So, based on my research, I was gonna ask you that also. Like, according to the findings of my research, like the participants, some of them are agrees with your, perception, and some are basically saying like, it is kind of our happiness, improvement of ourselves, instead of just blaming themselves, they are kind of thinking positive things about themselves as well. But with I was gonna ask you, like, you also, use the word in terms of remedy of that kind of problems. You use the word like redistribution,
Or maybe, or reciprocity.
I think I was focusing on the redistribution, and I was gonna ask you, like, could you elaborate on that? In terms of career guidance in, higher education, we still have a debate going on, in Turkish education system, because that's one part of my question. As you mentioned, some of the people who are graduating from guidance counseling, they are saying like we should be called psychological experts, instead of guidance counselors in Turkey. Even we have like problems and issues with the labeling those kind of careers as well, like as you mentioned. So it is really hard to me, according to my perception, it's really hard in social studies to basically locate a certain definition, for a certain term, including like leadership, education, or career. So like when you said in a pluralistic way, you have to have an argument, create an argument. Why I also wonder, what if you just go with certain experts, you basically agree with their perceptions. See what I mean? Like, would it still be okay instead of just creating an argument to kind of like have a subjective opinion about that? I'm sorry, I kind of mixed a lot of things together, but we have a debate, about that in my country as well. Still, defining what career meant, especially in terms of guiding counselors graduating from higher education. But I am also very curious about what you think about redistribution.
I think it's probably when I was talking about the unequal distribution of uncertainty. Was that it?
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So basically, that's based on an author, Peter Maris. Peter Maris was a sociologist who did a lot of work on bereaved women, and so he, because of that, he started. Sorry, I'm thinking this isn't working anymore. So basically, because of that, he started studying attachment theory, and then he wrote this book, Politics of Attachment in Private and Public Life, something like that. And this book is really interesting in the sense that it allows you to understand and to do this psychosocial analysis between the individual experience of uncertainty that is socially created. So it's basically very related to Beck's risk society and developing from that. And what he proposes is that there is an unequal distribution of uncertainty in society, which we can see by the way that people, for example, with, and I have research with quantitative data that demonstrates, for example, that women, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, have a tendency to experience more psychosocial uncertainty than men, for example, or higher levels. And for example, even people from economics working in PwC, so higher access to higher financial access, are more protected from uncertainty compared to the ones who have financial deprivation. So basically, it is more or less related to that. And then the interesting part for me is that he connects this, the way that we cope with uncertainty is based on attachment and how we develop attachment relationships with the ones who are closer to us when we are in our development. But then we use the exact same strategies to cope with uncertainty in the world, so with public experiences and social experiences of uncertainty. And so then he talks about how the power, and that's also the interesting part, is that the power to cope with uncertainty then is unequally distributed, of course, again.
Okay.
But yeah. So any other questions?
I think I mean, if anyone's got any burning questions or final points, if anyone's got something really pithy to sum up the day so far, or we can go and get a beer and try and figure it out over that. So thank you, everybody, and thank you to the panel. It's been a really interesting session, so thank you.